Houston Rockets and that they were on the front page of ESPN.com for like the first time in forever. You know better than anybody that here in Houston, we've been through the ringer when it comes to the Rockets because of the way that James Harden left town. Of all of the surprises of this 2023-24 NBA campaign, Bobby, the Rockets have to be near the top of the list with what Ime Udoka and the influx of both talent and youth have done here for Houston.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, what, like 17, 20, and 22 wins the last 3 years? Since Harden gets traded, it's almost three years ago, I think. But yeah, I mean, the hard part is, and I wrote about it, is like, you had to go out and hire a coach, right? And you got a good one. You can see his fingerprints all over this roster. And then the other thing is that, like, we talk about cap space and cap flexibility. Like, man, it is like hit or miss. And, to go out and get Fred, and we want to look, I want to look back on it. Like, free agents do not change teams. Like Fred, since, the guys in 2019, the Durant, Irving, and Kawhi group that left, guys don't do that. Like, Fred is the only player, I guess, if you can add Jalen Brunson in there, high-level guys who switch teams and sign outright. And he was able to do that. And, certainly you go out and get Dylan, and you build out your bench with some veterans, certainly Jeff Green. And I said the biggest unknown, and this is where luck comes into it, right? Like they had an agreement with Brook Lopez. They had a deal with Brook Lopez to come in there and basically be your starting center. Brook goes back to Milwaukee, and look what happens. Like, your best player is probably your center in Sengun, and that's where luck comes into it a little bit here. But they're in the thick of it. They're in the thick of it at least for a play-in tournament. And I think that's the goal. I mean, certainly you'd love to get in the top six, but be in a position to play some meaningful minutes, meaningful games for some of your younger players. But as I said, you still have some of your veterans, but you've got a little bit of a tough schedule with Minnie coming in, Minnie and Milwaukee, and then you go on the road with Miami.
When you kind of look at things, every team, because this was the basis of this article, was every team and their off-season moves and how things have kind of played out to this point. Were you expecting the dividends? I think we all agreed with their finally taking this philosophy. You can't just continue playing all these young guys under the system they were using. You had to have a new system, but you had to have pieces there to make it work, specifically Fred VanVleet, specifically the sign and trade for Dillon Brooks, as you knew those would be key figures. Did you expect them to be able to make this young, talented team into a legitimate, hard team to beat on a nightly basis? They're clearly not at the top of the standings, but you have to go in there and actually beat them now instead of just show up.
No, I didn't. I mean, I thought they would be improved. Well, what's improved? 30-52 somewhere. I thought they would be better. I think we probably underestimated how good of a coach Ime is. I mean, certainly, doesn't coach last year, comes in this year, different personnel than what he had with the Celtics here. And I think if he's not here, you probably don't have as much success. You're probably not 17-15, but I think he gives them an identity. I mean, listen, you were 29th in defensive efficiency last year and 30th the year before, and now you're like 6th. I mean, that doesn't happen, and you switch out some of the parts here. So I think he's played a huge role in this here. And no, I mean, I didn't expect him to be 17-15, and as of right now, one of the top 10 teams in the Western Conference.
Bobby Marks joining us here on Sports Talk 790, and yeah, his addition and Dillon Brooks' addition to the Rockets, I think, are as interesting as much for what they've done on the floor as the fact that their availability in the first place was kind of, I don't want to say flukish, but like, you see what Memphis did last year, and then the things that went south there, and part of that was Dillon Brooks' situation. That's why he was available. Obviously, the Boston situation with Ime Udoka, and they both wind up in the same city.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, hey, Memphis gets to a Western Conference Finals or an NBA Finals, they're re-signing Dillon Brooks. If Toronto's interesting just because of the situation they were in, I think what they were offering was probably comparable to what Fred got in Houston, and then you hit it right on the head as far as if Ime is still in Boston coaching, you have a different coach here, and things look awfully different here. So it's and Rafael has done a great job. I mean, he really has, just kind of having an idea of what he wanted to do. Certainly with some of the draft picks, and it cost him some of the former picks they've drafted here. But to kind of, get some veterans in here, some quality veterans in here where, I said the big thing was try not to impede the development of your younger player, but try to win games. Like, how do you go out and do that? And you guys look around the league. I mean, there are a lot of Detroit, for example, there are a lot of teams out there struggling, Portland, struggling to do that here. And, we'll see where the next, 50 games go. But I think they've done a really good job.
Bobby Marks of ESPN joining us here, being the front office expert and, mastering the impossible to master cap in the NBA. I know there's a date of importance today with Reggie Bullock Jr. Victor Oladipo is on the Rockets, or his contract is. We're 35 days out from the trade deadline, and I don't know that there's anything truly specific the Rockets need from a big picture, long-term planning standpoint, but maybe there's something they think could enhance their chances of, winning a play-in situation, maybe competing better or winning a series. Do you think those two players in particular are, because of their contractual situations, I guess, tradable and worth something to another team that the Rockets could, in fact, make something happen at this deadline?
Well, I think what else comes with it, right? I think with, certainly with Oladipo, and there was a reason why Houston didn't waive him, outright when they got him in the trade with, when they got him in the trade in the offseason here. He's earning $9.5 million. I think you could go out and try to get something, that player that can help you right now, but it'll probably cost you, depending on the player you're looking for, whether it be second-round picks. You've got to, you still have a bunch of those, it's funny, the Brooklyn stuff hasn't even come to fruition yet. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, you're sitting on those, those unprotected ones. This year's probably not the year you wanted that in 24 and in 26, and you got pick swaps in 25 and 27. So I'm probably not willing to do anything with those, but you've got some seconds to maybe to move down the road. But I think certainly the Oladipo contract would be something that if you have an eye on Houston, you'd circle that. They got a trade exception at $4.5 million, so they can go out and acquire a player, but you'd have to clear out a roster spot here. But I think they're in a good position where they don't have to do anything. Like, I think you can kind of just let this roster develop and kind of go into the second half of the season post trade deadline, with this group.
Well, it's interesting you put it that way, because I think one of the more pressing questions that Rockets, the fan base at least, is wanting to know is, what does a guy like Bobby Marks think of Jalen Green? He was obviously taken near the top of the draft.
Yeah.
Numbers are down, averages are down, and he and Cade Cunningham have been kind of disappointing for maybe very different reasons. But what's your assessment of him? Is he long for Houston? Is he going to develop under Ime? What would you do if you were in charge of the Rockets?
Yeah, I think he's been better. His last 5 games, I think he's close to 45% from three, 19 points. So he's been better. I know there's been a lot of those uneven games here. I think we often forget he's only 21. He'll be 22 in another month here, and he's got the second coach in 3 years here. So I'm not ready to kind of pull the plug on the Jaylen Green process here. I think what will be interesting is we get to the off season here. He's extension eligible. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to kind of commit long-term money to him? Has he shown enough this year? I think that's going to be the conversation that Houston will have to have. But I think he's been better. I think certainly turnovers was a key. Certainly with him and Porter Jr. here, but his numbers are down there. But so yeah, as I said, I think I need more of a body of work to kind of make a judgment on Jalen Green.
I guess similarly, same draft. What are your thoughts on Alperen Sengun?
Oh man, can we try to get him in the All-Star game here? Geez, it's unbelievable as far as what he's been able to do. He's probably one of the better young centers, not named Holmgren or Victor, out there, and those guys have certainly got a lot of publicity here. But he is a keeper. and to get a guy that's where you picked, in the teens there, I just think he's only going to get better, and that's a scary thing for teams.
I said this earlier on today's show. I said Alperen Sengun is the best player that was drafted in the top 20 of that draft. I don't know. Again, there's a lot of different ways to take that. I certainly know what progress he's made, and I think other players might ascend past him in their respective futures. But as we sit here today, and you definitely focus a lot in on this season, is that a reasonable statement to make?
Yeah, I mean, I think Toronto fans would probably want to fight you and Scotty Barnes. But listen, if you redrafted that draft, he's probably top 4, top 3, somewhere around there, compared to where he was picked. I mean, that's a pretty big jump.
And you mentioned, how young Jaylen is. He's still relatively young himself. I'm thinking, okay, what's year 4, 5, 6 going to look like for Alperen Sengun on both ends of the floor?
Well, that's the thing. There's a developmental stage here. I mean, he took the leap, right? He took the rookie contract leap here when he goes from years 2 and 3, whether it be, playing for a different coach, whether it be a style, whether it be having Fred and Dylan out there, whether just the roster and improving in general. And I said, he's been good and he's been really good, but I think there's another phase to his development.
Bobby Marks here on Sports Talk 790. He is the NBA's front office insider for ESPN. Bobby, appreciate the time. Really good conversation, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Bobby Marks here on Sports Talk 790. We'll come right back. We'll wrap up the 4 o'clock hour